My son laughed and said, "You've always been a burden in our lives, Mom. Just stay home this Christmas." I answered, "Then I'm going to stop paying the mortgage on your place that's in my name." The whole room froze in silence, and he asked, "What mortgage?" Let me tell you something. After 41 years of sacrificing everything for your child, you never expect to hear those words come out of their mouth. But there I was, sitting at that expensive dining table I had bought for them, being told I was a burden by the very person I had given my entire life to raise. It was Christmas Eve, December 21st, 2023, at my daughter-in-law Ashley's condo in Brooklyn Heights, New York. You know, one of those fancy neighborhoods where young couples pretend they've made it big. The whole family was gathered in their spacious living room. My son Michael, 33 years old, a systems analyst who thinks he knows everything about everything. Ashley, 30, my daughter-in-law with her marketing degree and her nose perpetually in the air. My two precious grandchildren, Emma, 9, and Liam, 6, and me, Margaret Johnson, 69 years old, recently retired after 41 years of loyal service at First National Bank of New York. The evening had started normally enough. I had arrived at 5:30 sharp, carrying homemade apple pie and the special stuffing recipe that Michael had loved since he was Emma's age. The apartment smelled like expensive candles, not the warm, homey scent of a real Christmas dinner, but that artificial vanilla nonsense that Ashley always burns to impress her friends. "Mrs. Margaret," Ashley greeted me at the door, using that formal tone she's maintained for 8 years of marriage to my son. Never Mom, never even Margaret, always Mrs. Margaret, like I'm some distant acquaintance she tolerates twice a year. The children ran to hug me, bless their hearts. Emma, with her bright eyes and missing front tooth, immediately started chattering about her school Christmas play. Liam, still small enough to climb into my lap, showed me the new video game Michael had bought him, something that probably cost more than I spend on groceries in a month. But I could feel the tension in the air. Ashley kept checking her phone, that nervous habit she has when she's planning something. Michael was unusually quiet, nursing his craft beer and avoiding eye contact with me. Something was brewing, and I could sense it in my bones. Dinner was served on the fine china set I had given them as a wedding gift. Ironic, considering what was about to unfold. Ashley had made her usual elaborate spread: organic turkey, quinoa stuffing, artisanal vegetables that tasted like expensive cardboard. Everything looked perfect for her social media posts, but there was no soul in any of it. We were halfway through the main course when Ashley cleared her throat dramatically. "So, Mrs. Margaret, Michael and I have been talking, and we've made some exciting plans for New Year's Eve." I smiled, expecting to hear about a nice family celebration. "Oh, how wonderful. What are you thinking?" That's when Ashley delivered the first blow. "We're going to spend New Year's Eve at my parents' beach house in Miami Beach. You know, just close family. Blood family." She paused, letting those words sink in like poison. "I'm sure you understand, right? It's really an intimate gathering. You can stay here at the apartment. You'll be fine." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Blood family. After 40 years of being this woman's children's grandmother, after paying for the roof over her head, I was being dismissed as not blood family enough. My chest tightened, but I've learned to swallow a lot of hurt over the years. "Oh," I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Well, that sounds lovely for you all." But Michael wasn't done. Oh no, my son had more cruelty in him than I ever imagined. He leaned back in his chair, that expensive ergonomic chair I had researched and bought for his home office, and let out this cold, mocking laugh that I had never heard before. "Come on, Mom. Stop with the drama. You've always been a weight on us anyway. Just stay home this Christmas, watch your little shows, make your little recipes. We need some space from all your neediness." The fork fell from my hand. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it couldn't beat properly. Emma and Liam stopped eating, sensing something terrible was happening, but not understanding what. Ashley actually giggled, this nasty little sound that made my skin crawl. A weight, a burden, needy. This from the son I had raised alone after his father abandoned us. This from the boy I had worked double shifts for, skipped meals for, sacrificed every dream for. This from the man whose children called me grandma, whose bills I was still helping to pay, whose very home existed because of my sacrifice. I felt something shift inside me. 40 years of suppressed anger, disappointment, and hurt crystallizing into something sharp and clear. My hands started trembling, not from weakness, but from pure rage. "Michael," I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me, "if I'm such a burden to you, then I suppose I should stop being one." He rolled his eyes. "Finally, some sense." That's when I dropped the bomb that changed everything. "Then I'm going to stop paying the mortgage on your condo that's in my name." You could have heard a pin drop in that fancy apartment. Ashley's face went white as the expensive tablecloth. Michael's beer glass stopped halfway to his lips. Even little Liam looked up from his plate, sensing the shift in energy. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then Michael, with confusion written all over his face, asked the question that proved just how blind he had been to his own life. "What mortgage, Mom?" In that moment, my heart broke and healed at the same time. My own son, my 33-year-old son, had no idea that the beautiful 2-bedroom condo he lived in, the condo worth $850,000 in one of Brooklyn's most desirable neighborhoods, was entirely in my name. He genuinely believed he had earned it all himself with his $75,000 salary when they bought it, now his $110,000 salary. He had no idea that every month for the past 6 years, his mortgage payment came directly from my retirement account. He had no idea that his credit score, damaged by youthful mistakes with student loans and credit cards, would never have qualified him for this loan. He had no idea that my perfect payment history, my spotless financial record built over 4 decades of responsible living, was the only reason his family had a home. My hands were shaking now, but my voice remained steady. "Michael, this condo, your beautiful home, the place where your children sleep safely every night, is legally and entirely in my name. The mortgage, the deed, the insurance, every single payment comes from my account." Ashley's fork clattered to her plate. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that 6 years ago, when you two came to me crying about needing a home for your growing family, I put my own apartment up as collateral. I used my retirement savings for the down payment. I signed every document because your credit wasn't good enough and your income wasn't high enough to qualify." Michael's face cycled through emotions like a slot machine. Confusion, realization, panic, and then anger. That's not... "Mom, you never said..." "I never said what, Michael? That every month when you hand over your little portion of what you think is your mortgage payment, I'm actually covering the other $2,000 from my Social Security and pension? That when you brag to your friends about your investment and your equity, you're actually living in your mother's house?" Ashley stood up so quickly her chair almost fell over. "Michael, you told me this place was ours. You said we were building equity. I've been posting about our home on social media for years." I thought," Michael stammered, and I could see the terrible realization dawning on him. He had been so focused on playing the successful young father that he had never bothered to understand how his life was actually funded. But what happened next showed me exactly who my son had become. Instead of shame, instead of gratitude, instead of the apology I deserved, Michael's face hardened with indignation. "Well, so what? You're my mother. That's what mothers do. They help their children. You don't need that big apartment in Queens anymore anyway. This works out better for everyone." "Better for everyone?" I repeated, my voice rising for the first time. "Being called a burden works out better for me? Being excluded from family vacations works out better for me? Being treated like an unwanted obligation in front of my grandchildren works out better for me?" Ashley jumped in, her voice shrill. "We never asked you to buy us a condo." "You're right," I said, standing up slowly. "You didn't ask. You begged. You cried. You brought my granddaughter to my apartment and told me how badly you needed help giving her a good life. And like the fool I was, I believed that helping you would make me part of this family, not a burden to it." I walked to the hallway closet and grabbed my coat, my purse, my dignity. The children were staring now, Emma's eyes wide with fear, Liam starting to cry because he could sense the adults were fighting. "Grandma," Emma whispered, "are you leaving?" I knelt down and hugged both children, breathing in their sweet scent, memorizing this moment because I didn't know when I'd see them again. "Grandma loves you both very much," I told them. "Don't ever forget that." When I stood up, Michael was blocking my path to the door. "Mom, wait. Let's talk about this. You can't just..." Can't just what, Michael? Can't just stop letting you walk all over me? Can't just demand basic respect from the son I raised? Can't just reclaim my own property when you've made it clear I'm not welcome in this family? The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the grandfather clock I had bought them ticking in the corner, marking the seconds of our destroyed relationship. You know what the saddest part is? I continued, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't do all of this for gratitude. I did it because I loved you. Because I wanted to see my son succeed, my grandchildren grow up in a beautiful home, my family happy and secure. I never expected worship, Michael, but I never expected to be called a burden either. I opened the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and Michael? About that New Year's Eve trip to Miami? I hope you and your blood family have a wonderful time, because when you get back, we're going to have a very different conversation about who lives where. The last thing I saw before I closed the door was Michael's face, finally understanding that his free ride was about to end. As I rode the elevator down from the 8th floor, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. 40 years of raising an ungrateful son, 6 years of subsidizing a lifestyle I was excluded from, and now, finally, the truth was out. Let me go back a little and tell you how I got here, because this story isn't just about one terrible Christmas dinner. This is about how a mother's love can be twisted into manipulation, and how sometimes the only way to save your family is to be willing to lose it. If you've ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most, if you've ever wondered whether kindness makes you weak or strong, stay with me, because what I learned in the days that followed will change how you think about family, sacrifice, and self-respect forever. Comment below and tell me, what would you have done in my situation? And subscribe to hear how this story ends, because trust me, you won't see it coming. My name is Margaret Elizabeth Johnson. I'm 69 years old, and I've been essentially a single mother since I was 29 years old. That's when my husband, Robert, decided that being married to a pregnant woman and working at an auto parts store in Queens wasn't exciting enough for his taste. He ran off with a 20-year-old cocktail waitress named Brandy, yes, with an I, leaving me 7 months pregnant and with exactly $843 in our joint checking account. I remember that number because I counted it obsessively for weeks, trying to figure out how I was going to raise a baby alone on a bank teller's salary of $14,000 a year. This was 1990, mind you, when $14,000 actually meant something, but it still wasn't nearly enough for a single mother in New York. But you know what? I didn't crumble. I didn't run home to my parents in Ohio with my tail between my legs like Robert probably expected. Instead, I rolled up my sleeves and got to work building a life for my son. Michael Robert Johnson was born on March 15, 1991, weighing 7 pounds and 2 ounces, with the most beautiful dark hair and these enormous brown eyes that looked like they could see straight into your soul. The moment I held him in that hospital room, with no husband by my side and no idea how I was going to pay for his college education, I made a promise. This boy would have every opportunity I could possibly give him, and for the next 40 years, I kept that promise, sometimes to my own detriment. I worked my way up at First National Bank of New York through sheer determination and perfect attendance. Teller to customer service representative to loan officer to assistant manager to senior account manager. Every promotion meant more money for Michael's future. Every raise meant better clothes, better food, better opportunities. When Michael was in elementary school, I noticed he was struggling with reading. Instead of accepting the public school's recommendation for remedial classes, I spent my entire Christmas bonus on private tutoring. When he showed an interest in computers in middle school, I bought him the most expensive home computer I could afford, even though it meant eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for dinner 3 nights a week. Michael was always a smart kid, I'll give him that, but he was also comfortable, maybe too comfortable. While other kids his age were doing paper routes or lawn work to earn spending money, Michael had everything handed to him. Looking back, I can see that was my first mistake. Mom, Tommy's parents make him mow lawns for his allowance. That's so unfair, 12-year-old Michael complained one summer afternoon. Well, honey, you don't need to worry about that, I told him, handing over $20 for the movies. Mama works hard so you can focus on your studies and just be a kid. I thought I was being a good mother. I thought I was protecting him from the financial stress I had grown up with. Instead, I was teaching him that money appeared magically, that his comfort was more important than understanding sacrifice. In high school, Michael's expensive tastes really started to show. He wanted designer sneakers that cost more than I made in a week. He wanted to go on the senior trip to Europe that cost $3,000. He wanted a car for his 16th birthday. Not just any car, but a nearly new Honda Civic because all the cool kids have nice cars, Mom. And like the fool I was, I gave him everything. I worked overtime, I picked up extra shifts during holidays, I even took a part-time weekend job at a department store to make ends meet. My back ached constantly from standing on my feet 12 hours a day. My social life was non-existent, but Michael had everything his heart desired. "Thanks, Mom," he'd say casually, grabbing the car keys. "You're the best." But even then, I noticed he never asked how I afforded these things. He never wondered why I wore the same 3 work outfits for 2 years while he got new clothes every season. It simply never occurred to him that his lifestyle required sacrifice from someone else. College was where things really spiraled. Michael had decent grades, B's mostly, a few A's in computer classes, but nothing that would earn him significant scholarships. The guidance counselor suggested starting at a community college and transferring to save money. "Mom, I can't go to community college," Michael protested. "That's for kids who couldn't get into real schools. I want to go to Baruch College for their computer science program." Baruch College, $35,000 a year for tuition alone. Not counting room and board, books, or the college experience Michael insisted he deserved. I sat at my kitchen table that night with my calculator, my bank statements, and a growing sense of panic. My salary had peaked at $58,000 a year. Good money for a woman my age without a college degree, but not nearly enough to fund a private college education. That's when I made what I now realize was my second huge mistake. I took out a second mortgage on my apartment. My little 2-bedroom apartment in Queens had increased in value over the years. The mortgage was almost paid off, and the equity was substantial. I figured I could borrow against it, pay for Michael's education, and then pay it back over time. "Mom, you're amazing," Michael said when I told him the college money was handled. He hugged me tight, and in that moment, I felt like the greatest mother in the world. "I'm going to make you so proud. I'm going to graduate and get a great job and pay you back for everything." But you know what Michael never asked? He never asked how I was paying for his education. He never asked about the sacrifice involved. He just accepted it as his due, like everything else I had given him. College turned Michael into someone I barely recognized. He came home for Christmas break freshman year, wearing expensive clothes I hadn't bought him, talking about restaurants I'd never heard of, using phrases like, "my inheritance," when referring to my apartment. "Inheritance?" I asked, confused. "Honey, I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon." He laughed. "I know, Mom. But when you're ready to downsize, I figured I could take over this place. It would be perfect for when I graduate and get married." I felt a chill run down my spine. When had my home become his expected inheritance? When had my future become something for him to plan around? But I pushed those uncomfortable feelings aside. He was my son. He was young. He'd mature. Graduation came and went. Michael got his computer science degree, and I was so proud I cried during the ceremony. He looked so handsome in his cap and gown, so confident and ready to take on the world. He moved back in with me temporarily while he looked for a job. Temporarily turned into 18 months of me cooking his meals, doing his laundry, and listening to him complain about how hard it was to find a position that met his standards. "Most of these jobs only pay 40 or 50,000, he'd grumble, scrolling through job listings on the laptop I'd bought him. "That's barely enough to live on in New York." Meanwhile, I was still paying off the second mortgage I'd taken for his education, still working full-time at 55 years old, still covering all the household expenses while he contributed nothing. When Michael finally found a job paying $68,000 a year, I thought my financial stress would ease up. Instead, Michael announced he was moving out to get his own place. "It's time I became independent, Mom," he said. "I found a great studio apartment in Manhattan. It's $1,500 a month, but I can afford it now." $1,500 a month. More than half his take-home pay, but he could afford it because he had never learned to budget, never learned that rent should be 30% of your income, never learned that financial independence meant more than just having a paycheck. 6 months later, he was back. "The apartment was too expensive," he admitted. "And Manhattan is so noisy. I couldn't save any money." Of course he couldn't save money. He was eating out every meal, buying gadgets he didn't need, going to bars and clubs several nights a week. But rather than learning from this experience, Rather than understanding that lifestyle choices have consequences, he simply moved back home and continued living like a teenager. That's when he met Ashley. Ashley Martinez was 24, a recent marketing graduate from Rutgers, and absolutely beautiful. She had this long, glossy black hair, perfect makeup, and a wardrobe that must have cost more than I made in 3 months. When Michael brought her home for the first time, I was genuinely happy for him. "Mom, this is Ashley," Michael said, and I could hear the pride in his voice. "Ashley, this is my mom, Margaret." "It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Johnson," Ashley said with a bright smile. But I noticed she looked around my apartment with a calculating expression, like she was appraising everything. Over the next few months, as their relationship got serious, I started noticing things about Ashley that made me uncomfortable. She had very specific ideas about how things should be done, what restaurants were acceptable, what neighborhoods were suitable for young professionals. "Michael, don't you think your mother would be more comfortable in a senior living community?" I overheard her say one evening when they thought I was asleep. "This neighborhood isn't really safe for older people." Senior living community. I was 57 years old, in perfect health, and still working full-time. But in Ashley's mind, I was already ready to be put out to pasture. When Michael and Ashley got engaged 2 years later, I was genuinely happy for them. Ashley seemed to make Michael more ambitious, more focused on his career. He got promoted to senior systems analyst, started making $75,000 a year, and began talking about their future with real enthusiasm. The wedding cost me $12,000. Not because they asked me to pay for it, Ashley's parents covered most of the expenses, but because I wanted to contribute something meaningful. I paid for the flowers, the photography, and Michael's tuxedo. I wanted my son's wedding to be perfect. At the reception, during the father-son dance that became a mother-son dance because Robert was long gone, Michael whispered in my ear, "Thank you for everything, Mom. I know I haven't always been easy, but you've given me such a good life. I love you." I cried right there on the dance floor. This was my son, my baby, acknowledging everything I had sacrificed for him. I thought we had turned a corner. I was so naive. After the honeymoon, Michael and Ashley moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. It was modest but nice, and I thought they were finally learning to live within their means. Ashley had gotten a job at a small marketing firm, making $42,000 a year, and between both their salaries, they seemed comfortable. For the first year of their marriage, things were good. They visited me regularly. We had Sunday dinners together, and when Ashley got pregnant with Emma, I was over the moon about becoming a grandmother. But pregnancy changed Ashley's perspective on their living situation. "We can't raise a baby in a one-bedroom apartment," she declared when she was 6 months along. "We need space. We need a real home." "Honey, babies don't take up much space," I said gently. "You two could make it work for a few years, save up money, and then move somewhere bigger." Ashley's face hardened. "Mrs. Margaret, with all due respect, Michael deserves better than making it work. He's a college graduate with a good job. We should be able to afford a proper home for our family." That word, deserves, sent warning bells off in my head, but I kept my mouth shut. When Emma was born, she was absolutely perfect. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of pure love with Michael's dark hair and Ashley's delicate features. Holding my granddaughter for the first time, I would have done anything to ensure her happiness and security, which is exactly what Ashley was counting on. Emma was 6 months old when Michael and Ashley showed up at my apartment on a Sunday evening, looking serious and nervous. "Mom, we need to talk to you about something important," Michael said, settling Ashley and the baby on my couch. "Of course, honey. What's on your minds?" Ashley took the lead, which should have been my first red flag. "Mrs. Margaret, Michael and I have been doing a lot of thinking about our future, about what kind of life we want to provide for Emma. We've found an amazing condo in Brooklyn Heights. It's in a great school district, close to the subway, perfect for a growing family." I smiled. "That sounds wonderful. Have you been saving up for a down payment?" The look that passed between them told me everything I needed to know. "Well, that's the thing," Michael said, suddenly unable to meet my eyes. "The condo is $850,000. We have some savings, but not enough for a full down payment, and our credit scores aren't perfect because of some student loan issues and a few credit card mistakes when we were younger." Ashley jumped in, bouncing Emma on her lap. "We went to several lenders, and they all said the same thing. We need a co-signer with excellent credit and stable income. Someone like you." My heart sank. You want me to co-sign a mortgage? Not exactly, Michael said. We want you to be the primary borrower. Your credit is perfect, your income is stable, and you have equity in this apartment. The bank said they'd approve the loan easily if it was in your name. But it would be our responsibility to pay it back, Ashley added quickly. We'd handle all the monthly payments. You'd just be helping us get approved. I stared at my son, this grown man with a wife and a baby, asking me to put my financial security on the line for a house I would never live in. Michael, that's a huge responsibility. If something happened and you couldn't make the payments, nothing's going to happen, Mom, he interrupted. I'm making good money. Ashley will go back to work after maternity leave, and we've budgeted everything out. We just need help getting our foot in the door. I looked at little Emma, sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms, and my resolve crumbled. Let me think about it, I said, but we all knew I was going to say yes, because that's what I always did. I always said yes to Michael. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a lawyer's office, signing papers that would change my life forever. The condo was purchased entirely in my name, with my credit, using my apartment as collateral for the down payment. Michael and Ashley moved into their new home, and I moved into a financial arrangement that would slowly but surely bleed me dry. But here's what I didn't know yet. Michael never told Ashley the real terms of our agreement, and Ashley never told Michael about her real plans for my future. If you thought that Christmas dinner revelation was shocking, wait until you hear what I discovered about the web of lies my own family had been spinning around me for years. Because the mortgage was just the beginning. What I'm about to tell you next will shock you as much as it shocked me. Because while I thought I was simply helping my son buy his first home, Michael and Ashley were orchestrating something much more sinister. The first red flag should have been how quickly they settled into their new life without me. Before the condo, Michael used to call me every few days, stop by on weekends, bring Emma over so I could spend time with my granddaughter. We had a routine. Sunday dinners at my place, where I'd make his favorite pot roast and mashed potatoes, and we'd watch old movies together while Emma played with the toys I kept at my apartment just for her. But after they moved into the Brooklyn Heights condo, those visits became less and less frequent. Mom, we're still settling in, Michael would say when I called. There's so much to organize, and Ashley's exhausted with the baby. We'll come by next weekend for sure, became, we'll come by soon, which became, we'll try to make it over sometime. Meanwhile, Ashley was posting constantly on social media about their new home, their amazing achievement, their dream come true. Photos of Emma in her beautiful nursery, pictures of dinner parties with Ashley's friends, videos of their housewarming celebrations that I was somehow never invited to. In every single post, every caption, every story, Ashley presented this condo as their personal accomplishment. Our first home. So grateful for this blessing. Hard work pays off. Not once, not even once, did she mention that it was actually my credit, my mortgage, my financial risk that made their dream possible. But I told myself I was being petty. They were young. They were excited. They deserved to feel proud of their home, even if it was technically my home. The first real warning sign came about 8 months after they moved in. I had stopped by unannounced, something I rarely did, but I was in the neighborhood visiting my doctor and thought I'd surprise them with homemade cookies for Emma. Ashley answered the door in expensive workout clothes I'd never seen before, looking flustered and annoyed. "Oh, Mrs. Margaret, we weren't expecting you." "I'm sorry, honey. I was nearby and thought I'd drop these off for Emma." I held up the container of chocolate chip cookies. "Is she napping?" "Actually, she's at my mother's for the afternoon. And Michael won't be home until late. He's working overtime on some big project." Something felt off about the way she was blocking the doorway, not inviting me in. I could see past her into the living room, and there were papers spread all over the coffee table, documents and folders and what looked like real estate listings. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "You seem stressed." Ashley's laugh was forced and brittle. "Everything's fine. Just, life stuff. Boring adult responsibilities." As I walked back to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ashley had been hiding something from me. But I pushed the thought away. I was probably just being paranoid. The second warning sign came during Emma's first birthday party. Ashley had planned this elaborate celebration, catered food, professional decorations, a photographer to capture every moment. The guest list included Ashley's family, her work friends, some of Michael's colleagues, and their new neighbors from the building. I was there, of course, but I felt like an outsider at my own granddaughter's party. Ashley's mother, Patricia, kept making pointed comments about how wonderful it must be to see your children doing so well for themselves. Ashley's father, Roberto, talked extensively about young people today knowing how to make smart investment decisions. At one point, I overheard Ashley talking to one of her work friends. We're thinking about refinancing in a few years to access some of the equity. The property values in this neighborhood are going crazy. We could probably pull out enough cash to renovate the kitchen and maybe buy a little vacation place upstate. My blood ran cold. Refinancing, accessing equity, this was my mortgage, my legal responsibility, my financial risk. But Ashley was talking about it like she owned the place outright. I cornered Michael in the kitchen. Honey, Ashley was just talking about refinancing the condo. You know that any changes to the mortgage would have to go through me, right? Michael looked genuinely confused. What do you mean? Michael, the mortgage is in my name. I'm the legal owner. Any refinancing would require my signature, my approval, my credit check. For just a moment, I saw panic flash across his face. Then he forced a smile. Of course, Mom. Ashley was just, daydreaming out loud. We're not actually planning anything like that. But I could tell he was lying. And what scared me more was that I was starting to suspect Ashley had been telling him lies, too. The third warning sign was the most devastating. I had been having trouble with my home insurance policy, some bureaucratic mix-up with the company's computer system. When I went to my agent, Mrs. Chen, to straighten it out, she pulled up my account on her computer. Mrs. Johnson, I see there's been some confusion in our system. It shows 2 properties under your name. Do you want to add the Brooklyn Heights condo to your homeowner's policy as well? I felt like I'd been slapped. 2 properties? What do you mean? Mrs. Chen turned her computer screen toward me. There it was, in black and white. Margaret Johnson, primary residence in Queens, secondary property in Brooklyn Heights. According to our records, you're the sole owner of both properties. Would you like to insure them both under the same policy? It might save you some money. I left that office in a daze. Secondary property? I wasn't supposed to be the owner of that condo. I was supposed to be a co-signer, a helper, someone who had simply made their loan possible. But legally, officially, I owned that $850,000 property outright. That night, I dug through all the paperwork from the mortgage closing. I read every document, every line of fine print, every clause and condition I had been too trusting to examine carefully the first time. The truth hit me like a freight train. I wasn't a co-signer. I was the borrower, the sole borrower. Michael and Ashley weren't even on the loan documents. The mortgage company had structured the deal this way because my credit and income were the only things securing the loan. In the bank's eyes, I had bought myself a second home and was allowing my son to live in it. But that's not how it had been explained to me. That's not what Michael and Ashley had told me I was signing up for. I called Michael the next morning, trying to keep my voice calm. Honey, I had an interesting conversation with my insurance agent yesterday. She mentioned that legally, I'm the sole owner of the condo. Can you explain that to me? There was a long pause. Mom, what difference does it make? We're making the payments. Michael, that's not what you told me. You said I would be a co-signer to help you qualify. You didn't tell me I would be the owner. Does it really matter? It's just paperwork. Just paperwork. My life savings, my retirement security, my financial future reduced to just paperwork. It matters to me, Michael. It matters because if something happens to you or Ashley, I'm responsible for a mortgage I can't afford on my own. Nothing's going to happen to us, Mom. You worry too much. But something was happening to us. Something had been happening for months, and I was just starting to see it. I started paying closer attention to their lifestyle, their spending habits, their financial decisions. And what I discovered made my stomach turn. Michael had been promoted again. He was now making $110,000 a year as a senior systems analyst. Ashley had gone back to work and was making $55,000 as a marketing coordinator at a larger firm. Combined, they were bringing in over $160,000 annually. But their lifestyle suggested they were spending far more than that. Ashley's wardrobe had become increasingly expensive. Designer handbags, luxury shoes, clothes with price tags that probably exceeded my monthly grocery budget. Michael was driving a brand new Honda Accord that he claimed to be leasing, but the payments had to be astronomical. They went out to dinner constantly, not to family restaurants or local diners, but to trendy spots in Manhattan where entrees cost $40 and wine bottles cost more than I spent on food in a week. Ashley's Instagram was a constant stream of expensive restaurants, weekend trips to the Hamptons, Broadway shows, and shopping excursions. When I asked Michael how they were managing all of this on top of their mortgage payment, he always had an explanation ready. "We budget really carefully, Mom. Ashley's great with money. We got a bonus this year. We're just good at finding deals." But the math didn't add up. Even with their combined income, even with careful budgeting, their lifestyle was unsustainable unless they had another source of income. That's when I realized what was happening. They weren't paying their full mortgage. I called the bank and requested a detailed statement of all payments made on the Brooklyn Heights property. What I discovered made me physically sick. For the past 6 years, Michael had been handing me what he called his share of the mortgage payment, $1,500 a month. I had been paying the remaining $2,800 from my retirement savings, thinking this was temporary, thinking he would eventually take over the full payment as his income increased. But Michael's payments had never increased. Despite 2 promotions and a significant salary bump, he was still only contributing $1,500 monthly. He was treating this like rent, not a mortgage payment on a property he considered his own. Meanwhile, I had been draining my retirement account month after month to cover the difference. My savings, which should have been growing as I approached retirement age, were disappearing at a rate of over $30,000 a year. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what I discovered when I started investigating their other expenses. Ashley's new car wasn't leased, it was financed, and when I checked the credit report that I was entitled to as someone whose credit had been used as a reference for their initial mortgage, I found something horrifying. My credit score had been used to secure not just their home loan, but also Ashley's car loan, 2 credit cards that were somehow tied to my accounts, and a personal loan for $25,000 that I had never seen or signed for. My perfect credit, built over 40 years of responsible financial management, had been systematically exploited to fund a lifestyle I was excluded from. But if you think that was the most shocking thing I discovered, you haven't heard anything yet. The real bombshell came when I found out what Ashley and Michael were planning for my future. And trust me, you're not going to believe this next part. What I discovered wasn't just financial exploitation. It was a calculated plan to erase me from my own life. Stay with me, because this is where the story takes a turn that will leave you speechless. The conversation that changed everything happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in October, 3 months before that disastrous Christmas dinner. I had gone to pick up Emma from school because Ashley had a work emergency and Michael was in meetings all day. As her grandmother, I was listed as an emergency contact, so the school called me when Ashley couldn't make it. Emma was chattering happily in the back seat of my car, telling me about her day when she said something that made my blood freeze. "Grandma, when you move in with us, can I help you decorate your new room?" I almost slammed on the brakes right there on Northern Boulevard. "What did you say, sweetheart?" "Mama said you're going to come live with us soon because your apartment is too big and too expensive for just one person. She said it would be better for everyone if we all lived together like a real family." My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. Did Mama say when this was going to happen? She said probably after Christmas, when I'm on winter break from school. She said it would be easier to move your stuff when I'm home to help. I managed to keep my voice calm for Emma's sake, but inside I was screaming. "That sounds interesting, honey. Did Mama say anything else about this?" "She said you're getting old, and it's not safe for you to live alone anymore, and that this way, you could help take care of me and Liam more, and we could take care of you too." Getting old, not safe to live alone, at 69, while still working full-time and in perfect health. When I dropped Emma off at the condo, Ashley was waiting in the lobby, looking frazzled and apologetic. "Mrs. Margaret, thank you so much for picking her up. My client had a complete meltdown about their campaign, and I couldn't get away." "No problem at all," I said, forcing a smile. "Emma mentioned something interesting on the way home. She said I'm going to be moving in with you all." Ashley's face went pale, then bright red. "Oh, that. Kids say the silliest things, don't they?" She must have misunderstood something, but I could see the truth in her eyes. This wasn't Emma's imagination. This was a plan that had been discussed, decided upon, and presented to my granddaughter as a done deal. Ashley, If there's something you and Michael want to discuss with me, I'm always available to talk. Of course, Mrs. Margaret, there's nothing to discuss right now, but if that changes, you'll be the first to know. Another lie. I was getting tired of all the lies. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emma's innocent words, about the implications of what Ashley had told her. So the next morning, I did something I had never done before. I hired a private investigator. His name was Detective Ray Morrison, a retired NYPD officer who specialized in family financial investigations. I felt ridiculous walking into his office like I was betraying my own family. But something deep in my gut told me I needed to know the truth. "Mrs. Johnson," Detective Morrison said after I explained my situation, "what you're describing sounds like potential financial elder abuse. It's more common than you might think." "Elder abuse?" I laughed bitterly. "Detective, I'm not some confused old woman. I know exactly what I signed. Ma'am, elder abuse isn't just about confusion or cognitive decline. It's about family members systematically exploiting an older person's resources for their own benefit. Based on what you've told me, there are several red flags here." He pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes. "First, they misrepresented the nature of the mortgage agreement. You thought you were co-signing. Instead, you became the sole owner and borrower. Second, they've been using your credit without your explicit knowledge for additional loans. Third, they're making plans for your living situation without your input. And fourth, they're presenting these plans to other family members as decisions that have already been made." My stomach was churning. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you should let me do some investigating. I'd like to look into their financial situation more deeply, see what other obligations they might have taken on using your information, and find out exactly what they've been telling other people about their plans for you." 3 weeks later, Detective Morrison called me with results that shattered my world. "Mrs. Johnson, you need to sit down for this conversation." I was already sitting in my kitchen, but I gripped the phone tighter. "Your son and daughter-in-law have been systematically planning to take control of your financial life. I found records of them consulting with an attorney about guardianship procedures, researching the process for selling your apartment, and looking into senior living facilities." "What?" I whispered. "They've also been in contact with a real estate agent about listing your Queens apartment. The agent has preliminary paperwork with both of their names on it, suggesting they've represented themselves as having power of attorney over your affairs." I felt like I was going to throw up. "Detective, I've never given them power of attorney. I've never signed any documents giving them control over my property." "I know. That's why this is so concerning. They appear to be laying the groundwork to convince someone, maybe a court, maybe a family member, maybe you yourself, that you're no longer capable of managing your own affairs. But I'm perfectly capable. I work full-time. I manage all my own bills. I'm in good health." "Mrs. Johnson, people who commit this kind of financial abuse rarely target people who are actually incapacitated. They target people who are trusting, generous, and emotionally vulnerable to manipulation. They target people like you." Detective Morrison had uncovered an entire paper trail of Ashley and Michael's plans for my future. They had been researching my retirement benefits, calculating the value of my apartment, and meeting with financial advisors about the best way to manage an elderly relative's assets. But the most devastating discovery was a series of text messages between Ashley and her sister Carmen that Detective Morrison had obtained through his contacts. The messages painted a picture of calculated manipulation that made me sick to my stomach. Ashley to Carmen. "Michael's mom is finally starting to slow down. She's been making more mistakes at work, forgetting things. I think it's time to start the transition." Carmen to Ashley. "Are you sure she's actually declining? Or are you just tired of dealing with her?" Ashley to Carmen. "Does it matter? She's 69 and living alone in a neighborhood that's getting worse. The smart thing is to consolidate everything now while we can still make it look like it's for her own good." Carmen to Ashley. "What about Michael? Is he on board with this?" Ashley to Carmen. "Michael does whatever I tell him to do. He feels guilty about how much money she's spent on him over the years, so he's easy to convince that this is taking care of her." Carmen to Ashley. "And she's really just going to hand over her apartment?" Ashley to Carmen. "She won't have a choice. We're going to present it as the only sensible option. She can't afford to keep paying our mortgage and maintain her own place. Something has to give, and it's not going to be our house." I read those messages over and over until the words blurred through my tears. They weren't concerned about my safety or my well-being. They were tired of managing the inconvenience of having me as a separate entity with my own life, my own home, my own financial independence. Ashley had been telling people I was declining and making mistakes to lay the groundwork for declaring me incompetent. She was planning to manipulate my genuine love for my family into signing away my independence. And Michael? Michael was just going along with whatever Ashley decided, motivated by guilt over my past financial sacrifices rather than any genuine concern for my future happiness. But there was more. Detective Morrison had also discovered that Ashley and Michael had been meeting with a financial planner about setting up what they called a family trust, with themselves as trustees and me as the beneficiary. In practical terms, this would have given them legal control over all my assets while providing me with a monthly allowance for my expenses. They've essentially designed a system where you would become a dependent in your own family, Detective Morrison explained. You would have no control over your own money, no say in where you lived, and no legal recourse if you disagreed with their decisions. The final piece of the puzzle came when Detective Morrison showed me photographs he had taken of Ashley and Michael meeting with a real estate developer. They were touring luxury condominiums in Florida, he said. The sales materials show they were looking at properties in the $400,000 range. The timeline on the purchase contract coincides exactly with the projected sale date of your apartment. They were planning to sell my home and use the proceeds to buy themselves a vacation property in Florida. Meanwhile, I was supposed to be grateful for a small room in the condo I was already paying for and a monthly allowance from my own money. I sat in Detective Morrison's office, staring at evidence of my family's betrayal, and felt something inside me break and heal at the same time. Detective, what are my options? Legally, you have every right to evict them from the Brooklyn property. It's your name on the deed, your mortgage, your legal responsibility. You could also file charges for the unauthorized use of your credit information. And practically, you have the power to completely disrupt their plans. They've built their entire lifestyle around exploiting your generosity. Without your financial support, their house of cards collapses. But they're my family, I whispered. Detective Morrison leaned forward, his expression kind but firm. Mrs. Johnson, family doesn't plot to steal your independence. Family doesn't lie about your mental capacity to justify taking your home. And family, sure as hell, doesn't spend years planning to trap you in a situation where you have no power over your own life. He was right. I had been confusing manipulation with love, exploitation with family loyalty. That night, I called my cousin Patricia in Tampa, the only relative I had left who wasn't financially dependent on me. I told her everything, showed her all the evidence Detective Morrison had gathered. "Margaret," she said, her voice shaking with anger, "how long has this been going on?" I think it's been building for years, but the active planning? At least 6 months, maybe longer. And you're just finding out now? I was so focused on being a good mother, a helpful grandmother, that I ignored all the warning signs. I thought love meant saying yes to everything. Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "What are you going to do?" For the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity and purpose. "I'm going to save myself." The next morning, I called my attorney, Mr. Harold Davis, who had helped me with my retirement planning. I made an appointment for that afternoon and brought every piece of evidence Detective Morrison had gathered. Mr. Davis listened to my story with increasing alarm. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and shook his head. "Margaret, what they've done is legally and morally wrong. The unauthorized use of your credit information alone is a serious crime. But more importantly, you have every legal right to protect yourself and your assets." "What would that look like?" "First, we secure your apartment. I'll draw up papers that explicitly state your intentions regarding your property, and we'll make sure Ashley and Michael have no claims on it whatsoever. Second, we address the Brooklyn condo situation. Since you're the legal owner, you have the right to evict them, sell the property, or negotiate new terms for their continued residency. Third, we freeze all credit accounts that have been compromised and file reports with the appropriate agencies about the unauthorized usage. And fourth, Mr. Davis continued, we make sure you have all the legal protections in place to prevent anyone from claiming you're incompetent or need a guardian." It took 2 weeks to get all the paperwork in order. 2 weeks of careful planning, documentation, and preparation for what I knew was going to be the most difficult conversation of my life. During those 2 weeks, I also made some other important decisions. I contacted the school and removed Ashley from Emma and Liam's emergency contact list, making it clear that any decisions about my grandchildren needed to go through Michael directly. I changed all my passwords, secured all my accounts, and moved my savings to a new bank that Ashley and Michael had no connection to. I also did something I had never done before. I started saying no. When Ashley called asking me to babysit last minute because she had dinner plans, I said, "I'm sorry, but I already have plans." When Michael asked me to lend him money for what he called a small cash flow problem, I said, "I'm not comfortable with that right now." When they invited me to Sunday dinner and then spent the entire meal talking about their vacation plans without ever asking about my week, I left early. "Where are you going, Mom?" Michael asked, looking genuinely confused. "Home," I said simply. "I'm tired of feeling invisible in my own family." The changes were small, but they sent a message, and I could see that message was making Ashley nervous. "Is everything okay with your mom?" I overheard her asking Michael. "She's been acting different lately." Different. Yes, I suppose standing up for yourself does look different when everyone's used to you lying down. 3 days before Christmas, I made my final preparations. I packed a suitcase with enough clothes for 2 weeks and made arrangements to stay with Patricia in Florida immediately after the holiday. I also wrote a letter, not to Ashley and Michael, but to Emma and Liam. A letter explaining that sometimes grown-ups make bad choices and that even when families have problems, grandparents never stop loving their grandchildren. I sealed that letter and left it with Mr. Davis, with instructions to give it to my grandchildren if things went as badly as I expected them to. Because I had finally accepted a truth that had been staring me in the face for years, my son didn't see me as a person worthy of respect. He saw me as a resource to be managed. And Ashley? Ashley saw me as an obstacle to be removed, but what they didn't realize was that this obstacle was about to fight back. Christmas Eve was going to be the last time they took my kindness for weakness. What happened at that dinner table wasn't an accident or a moment of lost temper. It was the result of weeks of careful planning and a lifetime of suppressed truth. And when I walked out of that condo, I wasn't just leaving a family dinner. I was leaving behind 40 years of being taken for granted and stepping into a life where my love for my family wouldn't come at the cost of my own dignity. But you know what? They still thought they could manipulate me. They still thought they could guilt me back into submission. They had no idea what was coming next. Share your thoughts below. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? Because what happens next will show you exactly what that choice looks like when you finally choose yourself. You already know how Christmas Eve ended, with me walking out of that condo after dropping the bomb about the mortgage. But what you don't know is what happened in the 2 weeks that followed, because that's when the real confrontation began. The phone calls started within hours of me leaving their apartment. First came Michael, his voice panicked and pleading. "Mom, please, we need to talk. I had no idea about the mortgage details. Ashley never explained it to me that way. Can we please just sit down and work this out?" Then, Ashley trying a different approach. "Mrs. Margaret, I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. Maybe we should all meet with a financial advisor to clear up the confusion about the property ownership." When I didn't answer their calls, they showed up at my apartment. I watched through my peephole as they rang the doorbell repeatedly, Michael calling out, "Mom, I know you're in there. Please just talk to us." But I was done talking. I was done explaining. I was done being manipulated by people who saw my love as weakness. On December 30th, I flew to Tampa to stay with my cousin Patricia. For the first time in years, I spent New Year's Eve surrounded by people who valued my company, not my bank account. "You look different," Patricia told me as we watched fireworks over the bay. "Lighter somehow." She was right. For the first time in decades, I wasn't worried about someone else's financial problems, someone else's needs, someone else's crisis that somehow required my money to solve. I stayed in Florida for 10 days, 10 peaceful days of reading books, walking on the beach, and remembering who I was before I became someone else's solution to everything. When I returned to New York on January 9th, there were 17 voicemails on my home phone and 43 text messages on my cell phone. The tone had shifted from pleading to desperate to angry. Michael's final voicemail said it all. "Mom, You're being ridiculous. We're family. You can't just abandon us because of some paperwork confusion. Call me back, or I'm coming over there. That evening, they showed up at my door with both children in tow. I opened it to find Emma and Liam looking confused and upset, Ashley holding Liam's hand with a death grip, and Michael looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Grandma," Emma ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Why didn't you come to see us? Mama said you were mad at us." My heart broke looking at my grandchildren, but I knelt down to Emma's level. "Sweetheart, I'm not mad at you or Liam. I love you both more than anything in this world. But sometimes grown-ups need to have difficult conversations about grown-up problems." I looked up at Michael and Ashley. "We need to talk, but not with the children here." Ashley's jaw tightened. "The children are part of this family. They have a right to know what's happening to their home." "Their home," I repeated softly. "Let's talk about that." I invited them in, but I remained standing in my living room. My territory, my rules. "Michael, Ashley, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. For 6 years, I have paid the majority of the mortgage on a property that you've presented to the world as your own achievement. I've watched you live a lifestyle that your actual income couldn't support, funded by my retirement savings." Michael started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. I hired a private investigator, and I know about your plans to have me declared incompetent. I know about the guardianship research, the meetings with real estate agents, the Florida condo you were planning to buy with the proceeds from selling my apartment." Ashley's face went white. That's not, we never." "I have text messages, Ashley. Screenshots of your conversations with your sister where you discuss how easy it would be to convince everyone that I'm declining and need to be managed." The room fell silent, except for the sound of Liam playing with a toy car, completely oblivious to the adult drama unfolding around him. Michael slumped into my armchair, the same chair where I used to read him bedtime stories when he was Liam's age. "Mom, I swear to you, I didn't know about any planning. Ashley handles all our finances. I just went along with whatever she said was best." "And that's exactly the problem, Michael. You went along with a plan to steal my independence because it was easier than thinking for yourself." Ashley's mask finally slipped completely. "Steal your independence? We were trying to take care of you. You're almost 70 years old, living alone in a neighborhood that's going downhill. We thought it would be better for everyone if we were all together." "Better for everyone," I repeated. "You mean better for you to have a live-in babysitter and housekeeper while you used my equity to fund your vacation home in Florida?" "That's not fair," Ashley shot back. "We've been making mortgage payments for 6 years, $1,500 a month toward a $2,800 mortgage. You've been paying rent, Ashley. Rent on a property that belongs to me, subsidized by my retirement funds." I walked to my kitchen table and picked up a folder of documents I had prepared with Mr. Davis. "So here's what's going to happen. You have 3 choices." Michael looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Mom, please. Choice 1. You move out of the condo within 30 days. I'll sell it and use the proceeds to rebuild my retirement account that you've been draining for 6 years. Ashley gasped. "You can't kick us out. We have children. Emma's in school." Choice 2. You stay in the condo and pay me market rate rent. That would be $4,000 a month, based on comparable properties in your neighborhood. "We can't afford $4,000 a month," Michael protested. "Then I suggest you make some lifestyle adjustments. Cancel the expensive dinners, sell Ashley's luxury car, skip the Hampton weekends. Live like people who make your actual income." "What's the third choice?" Ashley asked quietly. "The third choice is the one I'm hoping you'll take. You acknowledge that I am the owner of that property and that you are tenants. You pay me reasonable rent, say $2,500 a month, which still saves you $1,500 compared to market rate. In exchange, I want respect. I want to be included in family decisions. I want regular visits with my grandchildren. And I want an end to the lies and manipulation." I looked directly at Ashley. "And I want a written agreement that you will never again attempt to interfere with my independence, my living situation, or my financial decisions." Michael was crying now, actual tears streaming down his face. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I never meant for you to feel." "Michael, for 40 years, I've watched you take everything I gave you for granted. Your education, your opportunities, your home. You accepted all of it without ever asking what it cost me. But taking my money is one thing. Planning to take my independence was unforgivable. Ashley was staring at the floor, her entire body radiating anger and humiliation. "So what's it going to be?" I asked. The next hour was brutal. Ashley tried every manipulation tactic in her arsenal: tears, anger, guilt, threats. She accused me of being selfish, of not caring about my grandchildren's stability, of being vindictive and cruel. Michael went back and forth between supporting me and trying to defend Ashley, clearly torn between his loyalty to his wife and his guilt over how they had treated me. Finally, Ashley broke. "Fine," she said, her voice ice cold. "We'll take your third option. $2,500 a month rent, regular visits, whatever you want. But don't expect us to pretend we're grateful." "I don't want your gratitude," I replied calmly. "I want your respect, and I want my grandchildren to grow up understanding that love and family loyalty don't mean sacrificing your dignity." We signed the agreement that night. Mr. Davis had prepared everything in advance, and I had it notarized the following day. But the real change wasn't in the paperwork, it was in the dynamic. 6 months later, Michael and Ashley were different people. Without the financial cushion of my overpayment, they had to actually budget, actually live within their means, actually make adult decisions about their spending. Ashley got a second job working weekends at a boutique. Michael started taking freelance IT projects in the evenings. They sold Ashley's expensive car and bought a reliable used sedan. They canceled subscriptions they didn't need and learned to cook at home instead of ordering takeout every night. Most importantly, they learned to value my presence instead of taking it for granted. Now I have dinner with them every Sunday. The kids spend every other Saturday at my apartment. When I offer to help with something, really help, not just pay for it, they say thank you and mean it. Ashley still struggles with our new dynamic sometimes, but last month, she did something that showed me real growth. Emma had been begging for an expensive dance class that cost $300 a month. Old Ashley would have called me and hinted around until I offered to pay for it. New Ashley sat down with Emma and explained that some things cost too much money, but that they could look for less expensive dance options together. When I offered to pay for half the class as Emma's birthday gift, Ashley actually said, "That's incredibly generous, Mrs. Margaret, but we should probably find something we can afford ourselves. Maybe you could help Emma with her recital costume instead." That's when I knew we had turned a real corner. Today, 2 years after that Christmas dinner confrontation, my relationship with my family is the strongest it's ever been. But it's built on honest foundations now, mutual respect instead of financial dependency. The condo is still in my name, and it will stay that way until I decide otherwise. Michael and Ashley understand that their security depends on maintaining a respectful, honest relationship with me, not on manipulation and exploitation. Emma and Liam are thriving. They're learning the value of money, the importance of earning what you have, and the difference between love and entitlement. And me? I'm learning that the best gift you can give your family isn't unlimited financial support. It's teaching them to respect themselves and others enough to build lives they can sustain with their own efforts. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes kindness means setting boundaries. And sometimes the best thing you can do for people you care about is refuse to enable their worst impulses. My son finally grew up at 35 years old. My daughter-in-law finally learned that family isn't about what you can extract from people, but what you can contribute. And I finally learned that being a good mother doesn't mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of your child's comfort. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt taken for granted by the people you love most, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to the channel for more real stories of overcoming and empowerment. And watch now the story that's playing on your screen, because everyone deserves to know that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity and demand the respect you've always deserved.